Here's a complete and structured answer on the topic: lore of torts, origin, development, meaning, definition, and key concepts, based on your outline. It's concise yet detailed, suitable for exam answers or academic notes. Origin and development of lore of torts in England. 1. Origin. The lore of torts in England originated from common law, which was judge-made and developed through judicial decisions. In early times, wrongs were redressed through private vengeance or compensation by money or goods. Gradually, the King's Courts began recognizing wrongs and prescribing specific forms of action. 2. Forms of action. In medieval England, the forms of action were specific legal procedures that determined whether a person could get relief. Common forms included trespass, direct, forcible injury to person or property. Case, action on the case, indirect or consequential injury. Trover, wrongful conversion of another's goods. Detenue, wrongful detention of goods. Replevin, recovery of goods unlawfully taken. Forms of action determined whether a person had a legal remedy. Later, these were abolished, and law began focusing on the right itself, not the procedural form. 3. Specific remedies. Trespass, compensation for direct injury. Negligence, compensation for careless conduct. Defamation, damages for harm to reputation. Nuisance, injunction or damages for interference with enjoyment of property. Conversion, return of property or its value. Thus, the law of torts developed case by case, establishing principles through judicial precedents. B. Evolution of law of torts in India. 1. Uncodified and judge-made. The law of torts in India is not codified like the Indian Penal Code or Contract Act. It is derived from English common law, adapted by Indian courts according to local conditions. Major cases like M.C. Mehta v. Union of India, 1987, expanded tort law in India by developing doctrines such as absolute liability. 2. Advantages. Flexibility. Judges can adapt the law to new wrongs, e.g., privacy, environmental harm. Growth through precedents. Allows law to evolve with changing social needs. 3. Disadvantages. Uncertainty. No clear codified statute. Limited awareness. Fewer tort cases in India due to lack of knowledge. Dependence on courts. Development depends on judicial activism. C. Meaning and function of law of torts. Meaning. The word tort is derived from the Latin word tortum, meaning twisted or wrong. A tort means a civil wrong, independent of contract, for which the remedy is compensation in damages. Functions. 1. Prescribing standards of conduct. It sets behavioral standards, e.g., duty of care, not to defame, not to trespass. 2. Redressal of wrongs. Provides compensation to the injured person. 3. Prevention and deterrence. Prevents repetition of similar wrongs by imposing liability. 4. Injunctions. Prevents the continuation or repetition of a wrongful act. D. Definition of tort. Several jurists have defined tort. Salmond. A tort is a civil wrong for which the remedy is a common law action for unliquidated damages, and which is not exclusively the breach of a contract or trust or other merely equitable obligation. Winfield. Tortious liability arises from the breach of a duty primarily fixed by law. This duty is towards persons generally, and its breach is redressable by an action for unliquidated damages. In short, a tort is a civil wrong, not arising from contract, where the injured party is entitled to compensation. E. Constituents of a tort. 1. Wrongful act or omission. There must be a violation of a legal duty. 2. Legal damage, injury, infringement of a legal right recognized by law. 3. Remedy. The injured person has a right to claim damages. Important maxims. Injuria sine damno. Legal injury without actual damage. Case. Ashby v. White, 1703, plaintiff's right to vote was violated though no loss occurred. Right pointing arrow held actionable. Damnum sine injuria. Actual loss without legal injury. Case. Gloucester Grammar School case, 1410, no remedy is no legal right was violated. Ubi jus ibi remedium. Where there is a right, there is a remedy. F. Tort vis-a-vis other wrongs. Basis. Tort. Crime. Breach of contract. Nature civil wrong. Public wrong. Civil wrong. Duty fixed by law. Fixed by law. Fixed by parties. Object compensation. Punishment. Enforcement of contract. Remedy damages. Imprisonment, fine damages or specific performance. Example defamation, negligence theft, murder. Failure to deliver goods, g. Relevance of intention, motive, and malice. Intention. Important in intentional torts, e.g., assault, false imprisonment. Example, throwing a stone intentionally causing harm. Right pointing arrow actionable. Motive. Usually irrelevant, but sometimes considered, e.g., malicious prosecution. Malice. Refers to wrongful intention or improper motive. Relevant in torts like defamation, malicious prosecution, and conspiracy. Conclusion. The law of torts is a dynamic and evolving branch of law, primarily based on judicial creativity and common sense principles of justice and fairness. Though uncodified in India, it plays a crucial role in protecting individual rights and promoting responsible behavior in society. Would you like me to make this into a formatted PDF or handwritten style notes version for study or submission? Here is a concise case summary of White v. John Warwick and Company, Limited, 1953, to all 1021, often studied in law of torts under the topic of negligence, bailment, and vicarious liability. Case name, White v. John Warwick and Company, Limited, 1953, to all 1021, CA. Court of Appeal, England. Facts. The plaintiff, White, was a cyclist employed by a newspaper company. His employer had hired a cycle with a carrier from the defendants, John Warwick and Company, Limited, under a contract that contained a clause exempting the defendants from liability for personal injuries to riders using the cycle. While the plaintiff was using the bicycle in the course of his employment, the saddle tilted, causing him to fall and sustain injuries. The defect was due to negligence of the defendant's employees in maintaining the cycle. Issue. Was the defendant company liable for the plaintiff's injury, despite the exemption clause in the hiring contract between the company and the plaintiff's employer? Held. The Court of Appeal held that the exemption clause did not protect the defendants from liability for the negligence of their employees. The clause only exempted the company from contractual liability, i.e., liability arising from the contract of hire, not from tortious liability, i.e., negligence by their servants. The defendants were therefore liable in tort for the negligence of their employees, which caused the plaintiff's injury. Principle, ratio decidendi. A contractual exemption clause does not automatically exclude liability in tort, unless its wording clearly covers negligence by the defendant or its servants. There can be concurrent liability in contract and tort, but an exemption clause in contract must be strictly construed. Significance. The case established an important distinction between liability arising in contract and liability arising in tort. It emphasizes that an employer or bailer may still be liable in tort even when a contract limits or excludes certain contractual obligations. Commonly cited in discussions of tortious liability despite contract and interpretation of exclusion clauses. Key takeaway. Even where a contract exists between two parties, an injured person may sue in tort if the damage was caused by negligence, unless the contract clearly and expressly excludes that liability. Would you like me to make a handwritten summary sheet of this case, like the one I made for law of torts? Here is a complete and clear case summary of Town Area Committee v. Prabhudayal, N. 1975 all 132, a key Indian case often cited in the law of torts, particularly regarding vicarious liability and liability of public authorities. Case name, Town Area Committee v. Prabhudayal citation, N. 1975 all 132, Allahabad High Court. Court, Allahabad High Court. Facts. The plaintiff, Prabhudayal, was injured by the negligent act of a driver employed by the Town Area Committee, TAC. The driver, while performing his official duty, driving a tractor belonging to the committee, negligently ran over the plaintiff, causing severe injuries. The plaintiff filed a suit for damages against both 1. The driver, and 2. The Town Area Committee, as the driver's employer. The committee contended that it was not liable, claiming sovereign immunity, that is, the act was done in exercise of a sovereign function and hence not actionable. Issue: whether the town area committee, a local authority, was vicariously liable for the negligent act of its employee, committed while performing his official duties. Could the committee claim sovereign immunity for such negligence? Arguments: the town area committee argued that the driver was performing duties in connection with a sovereign function of the state, and therefore, it could not be held liable for his tortious act. The plaintiff contended that the committee was performing non-sovereign, municipal functions, and hence, was liable for the negligence of its employee. Held. The Allahabad High Court held that the town area committee was liable for the negligence of its driver. The court ruled that sovereign immunity applies only to acts done in the exercise of strictly sovereign functions, such as defense, judicial acts, etc., not to municipal or commercial activities. The operation of a tractor by the committee's employee was a non-sovereign, routine, administrative function, not involving any sovereign power. Judgment: ratio decidendi. Vicarious liability was imposed on the town area committee for the negligence of its employee. The court clearly stated that, when a statutory body like a town area committee performs acts of an ordinary non-sovereign nature, it is liable for the torts of its employees, as any other employer would be. Principle established. 1. Local authorities and statutory bodies are liable in tort for the negligent acts of their employees when such acts are done in the course of employment and do not involve sovereign powers. 2. Sovereign immunity is a limited defense and cannot be invoked for non-sovereign, public utility, or administrative functions. Significance: this case is a landmark Indian precedent on the liability of local authorities in the restricted scope of sovereign immunity. It follows the principle laid down in State of Rajasthan v. Vidyavati, AIR 1962, South Carolina 933, where the Supreme Court held the state liable for the negligence of its employees performing non-sovereign functions. Conclusion: the town area committee was held vicariously liable for the negligent act of its driver. The defense of sovereign immunity was not available, since the act was non-sovereign in character. Key takeaway: public authorities are not immune from tortious liability for the negligent acts of their servants when performing non-sovereign, administrative, or welfare functions. Would you like me to create a handwritten version of this case? Here is a detailed and well-organized case summary of P. Sitharamaiah vs. G. Mahalakshmimma, A 1958 AP 103, an important Indian case in the law of torts, dealing with the concept of damnum sine injuria, damage without legal injury. Case name: P. Sitharamaiah vs. G. Mahalakshmimma. Citation: A 1958, Andhra Pradesh 103. Court: Andhra Pradesh High Court. Judge: Justice Chandra Reddy. Facts: the plaintiff P. Sitharamaiah and the defendant G. Mahalakshmimma were both running bus services on the same route under separate permits. The defendant started an additional bus service on the same route, which caused financial loss to the plaintiff's business. The plaintiff filed a suit for damages, claiming that the defendant's act of running an additional bus caused him monetary loss and was therefore a civil wrong tort. Issue: whether the defendant's lawful act, which caused economic loss to the plaintiff, amounts to a tortious wrong. In other words, does financial loss alone, without violation of a legal right, give rise to liability in tort? Arguments. Plaintiff's argument: the defendant's act caused loss of profits and financial injury, hence she should be held liable in damages. Defendant's argument: the defendant had a legal right to run her bus service under a valid permit. The loss suffered by the plaintiff was a consequence of lawful competition, and no legal right of the plaintiff was violated. Held: the Andhra Pradesh High Court dismissed the plaintiff's suit. The court held that no legal right of the plaintiff was infringed, and therefore, no actionable tort was committed. Judgment: ratio decidendi. The court applied the legal maxim: damnum sine injuria, damage without legal injury. Justice Chandra Reddy observed, every damage or loss does not give rise to an action for damages unless there is also a violation of a legal right. The defendant was exercising a lawful. Every damage or loss does not give rise to an action for damages unless there is also a violation of a legal right. The defendant was exercising a lawful right in running her bus service under a valid permit. The plaintiff's loss was a result of lawful competition, which is not actionable in tort. Principle established. 1. Mere loss or damage without infringement of a legal right is not actionable in tort. 2. Lawful competition, even if it causes economic loss to another, does not amount to a tort. 3. To claim damages in tort, there must be injury, violation of a legal right, not merely damage or loss. Significance. This case is a leading Indian authority on the doctrine of damnum sine injuria. It reinforces the distinction between moral wrongs or business loss and legal wrongs, highlighting that tort law protects legal rights, not mere interests. Conclusion. The defendant's act of running a competing bus service was lawful, and though it caused economic loss to the plaintiff, it did not violate any legal right. Therefore, the case was dismissed, no tortious liability arose. Key takeaway. Loss without violation of a legal right, damnum sine injuria, is not actionable in tort law. Only a legal injury, injuria sine damno, gives rise to a remedy. Would you like me to make this case into a handwritten exam-style page like the previous ones, blue ink note style with headings and underlines? Here is a structured case summary of Rajkot Municipal Corporation v. Manjulban Jantilal Nakaman Oz. 1997. Important for torts, especially on municipal liability and negligence by public authorities. Case name and citation. Rajkot Municipal Corporation v. Manjulban Jantilal Nakaman Oz. Civil Appeal Number 200 of 1997, decided the 17th of January 1997. Court. Supreme Court of India. Facts. The deceased, Mr. Jantilal, was walking along a footpath in the area under jurisdiction of the appellant municipal corporation, Rajkot Municipal Corporation. A roadside tree, under the management of the corporation, suddenly fell on the deceased in fine weather, causing his death. The respondents, widow and children, sued the corporation for damages, claimed 1 lakh rupees, alleging negligence in maintenance of the tree. Trial court awarded 45,000 rupees. The High Court affirmed. The corporation appealed to the Supreme Court. Issues 1. Whether the municipal corporation owed a duty of care in tort to persons walking adjacent to trees under its control. 2. Whether the fall of the tree, in still weather, raised a presumption of negligence or shifted burden of proof to the corporation. 3. Whether liability in tort could be fastened on a public authority for non-inspection or maintenance of roadside trees under statutory duty. 4. Whether the concept of proximity, foreseeability and duty could apply to a municipal body in this situation. Held. Judgment. The Supreme Court allowed the appeal of the corporation, i.e., the decree against the corporation was set aside. The court held that, although the statutory provision, under Bombay Provincial Municipal Corporations Act, 1949, S66, required the corporation to plant and maintain trees on streets, the word may in the statute was not to be taken automatically as an absolute duty in all circumstances, or the plaintiffs failed to establish proximity or that the danger of the particular tree falling was reasonably foreseeable such that the corporation must inspect, discover, and remedy in advance, or the corporation cannot be expected to have an absolute duty to inspect every tree constantly and foresee every risk of fall. There must be some evidence of actual danger or known defect. Or since the respondents did not prove that the corporation had knowledge of decay or defect or that such fall was reasonably foreseeable, the judgment in their favor could not stand. Principle, ratio. A public authority may owe a duty of care in tort when it creates a danger or undertakes an activity that the public can reasonably rely upon and that danger was reasonably foreseeable. But mere statutory duty to maintain trees on roadsides does not automatically convert into an absolute duty of care in tort unless the duty is framed in absolute terms, without discretion, and the damage is of the kind the statute intended to prevent. The burden remains on plaintiff to show breach of the duty, knowledge, or reasonable foreseeability of the danger, and proximate cause. The absence of such evidence will defeat the claim. Significance. This case limits the scope of municipal liability in tort for maintenance of public trees. It clarifies that authorities are not automatically liable for any accident arising from a falling tree. Emphasizes foreseeability, proximity, and knowledge of danger as key ingredients in negligence claims against public bodies. Highlights the distinction between a statutory duty and a tortious duty of care. Not all statutory obligations translate into tort liability. Useful precedent in Indian tort law for questions involving local authorities, public property, and omission, non-action, liability. Key takeaway: to claim damages from a municipal corporation in tort for an accident caused by falling roadside tree, the plaintiff must show that the corporation had a duty of care to pedestrians in respect of that tree. The condition of the tree created a reasonably foreseeable risk of harm. The corporation knew, or reasonably ought to have known, of the defect or risk. The corporation failed to take reasonable steps of inspection, maintenance. The plaintiff suffered damage as a proximate result. If any of these links fails, especially foreseeability or knowledge, the corporation may not be liable. If you like, I can prepare a handwritten exam-style summary sheet of this case, similar if the key takeaway. To claim damages from a municipal corporation in tort for an accident caused by falling roadside tree, the plaintiff must show that the corporation had a duty of care to pedestrians in respect of that tree. The condition of the tree created a reasonably foreseeable risk of harm. The corporation knew, or reasonably ought to have known, of the defect or risk. The corporation failed to take reasonable steps of inspection, maintenance. The plaintiff suffered damage as a proximate result. If any of these links fails, especially foreseeability or knowledge, the corporation may not be liable. If you like, I can prepare a handwritten exam-style. Here is a complete and structured case summary of the landmark English tort law case Ashby v. White 1703, 2 LD Ryam 938, which is fundamental to understanding injuria sine damno and the maxim ubi jus ibi remedium. Case name: Ashby v. White 1703, to Lord Raymond 938. Court: House of Lords, England. Judges: Chief Justice Holt and others. Facts: the plaintiff, Mr. Ashby, was a qualified voter in a parliamentary election at Aylesbury. The defendant, Mr. White, a constable, wrongfully refused to allow the plaintiff to cast his vote. Despite this wrongful refusal, the candidate for whom the plaintiff intended to vote won the election, so the plaintiff suffered no actual damage or loss. The plaintiff nonetheless sued the defendant for violation of his legal right to vote. Issue: whether a person can recover damages in tort when no actual loss or damage has occurred, but there has been a violation of a legal right. Arguments: defendant's argument: since the plaintiff suffered no actual loss, he should not be entitled to compensation. Plaintiff's argument: his legal right to vote was infringed, which itself constitutes a legal injury, even if no damage resulted. Held: the House of Lords held in favor of the plaintiff, Ashby. The court ruled that the infringement of a legal right is actionable even without actual loss. Judgment: ratio decidendi. Chief Justice Holt observed, if the plaintiff has a right, he must of necessity have a means to vindicate and maintain it, and a remedy if he is injured in the exercise of it, and indeed it is a vain thing to imagine a right without a remedy, for want of right and want of remedy are reciprocal. Thus, even though the plaintiff suffered no measurable damage, his legal right to vote had been wrongfully denied, which is a legal injury. Principle established. 1. Injuria sine damno. A violation of a legal right without actual damage is actionable. The mere infringement of a right is sufficient to claim damages. 2. Ubi jus ibi remedium. Where there is a right, there is a remedy. Every violation of a legal right gives rise to a corresponding remedy under the law. Significance: this case is a cornerstone of tort law and forms the foundation of the concept of actionable wrongs. It distinguishes legal injury, injuria, from actual damage, damnum. It protects individual rights even in absence of financial loss. The case established that tort law is about protection of rights, not merely compensation for loss. Related case for contrast: Gloucester Grammar School case, 1410. There was actual loss, damnum, but no legal injury, injuria, hence, no action could be maintained. Damnum sine injuria. Conclusion. The wrongful denial of the plaintiff's right to vote constituted a tort, even though no actual loss occurred. The court affirmed that infringement of a legal right itself gives rise to a cause of action. Key takeaway. Ashby v. White, 1703, is the leading authority on the maxim injuria sine damno. Violation of a legal right without damage is actionable, and it upholds the foundational principle of tort law. Ubi jus ibi remedium, where there is a right, there is a remedy. Underscore. Would you like me to prepare this as a handwritten exam-style note? Here is a comprehensive case summary of the important Indian tort law case Municipal Corporation of Agra v. Asharfi Lal, Air 1921 All 202, which deals with negligence of municipal authorities and liability for failure of statutory duty. Case name: Municipal Corporation of Agra v. Asharfi Lal. Citation: Air 1921 All 202. Court: Allahabad High Court. Bench: Pigott and Walsh, J.J. Facts: the plaintiff, Asharfi Lal, owned a house situated within the limits of the Municipal Corporation of Agra. A drain or sewer maintained by the corporation ran near the plaintiff's house. Due to negligent maintenance by the corporation, the drain became choked and overflowed, causing damage to the plaintiff's property. The plaintiff filed a suit for damages against the corporation, claiming that it had failed in its duty to keep the drainage system in good condition. The municipal corporation argued that it was not liable, as the act complained of was done in the exercise of statutory duty and, hence, protected under sovereign immunity. Issue 1. Whether the municipal corporation was liable in tort for the damage caused due to negligent maintenance of the drain. 2. Whether the defense of sovereign immunity could be invoked by the corporation for a statutory function. Arguments. Plaintiff's argument. The corporation owed a duty of care to maintain the drainage system properly. Its failure to do so caused direct loss and damage, and thus it must be held liable in negligence. Defendant's argument. The drainage maintenance was a statutory function, not a commercial one, and hence the corporation should be immune from liability for any negligence occurring in discharge of such public duties. Held. The Allahabad High Court held that the municipal corporation was liable for the negligence of its employees in maintaining the drain. The court found that the act complained of was non-sovereign in character, that is, it was part of the ordinary, civic, administrative functions of the corporation, not an act of state. Judgment, ratio decidendi. The court ruled that a local body like a municipal corporation, though performing statutory duties, is liable for the negligence of its servants if the act complained of arises from the performance of a non-sovereign function. The duty to maintain drains and sewers in good order is a statutory obligation, and the corporation cannot escape liability for negligence in carrying out that obligation. The court drew a distinction between O sovereign functions, acts done in exercise of sovereign power, e.g., defense, administration of justice. O non-sovereign functions, acts done for public convenience or local administration, e.g., sanitation, water supply, drainage. The latter attract vicarious liability. Principle established. 1. Municipal corporations and local bodies are liable for negligence in the performance of non-sovereign functions. 2. Statutory powers or duties do not automatically grant immunity from tortious liability. 3. The principle of vicarious liability applies to local authorities for the acts of their servants committed in the course of employment. Significance. This is one of the earliest Indian cases recognizing tortious liability of local authorities for negligence in public duties. It paved the way for later landmark decisions such as O State of Rajasthan v. Vidyavati, AIR 1962, South Carolina 933, affirming that the state is liable for torts of its employees performing non-sovereign functions. O Town Area Committee v. Prabhu Dayal, AIR 1975 All 132, reaffirming municipal liability. Conclusion. The Municipal Corporation of Agra was held liable in tort for damage caused by negligence in maintaining the public drain. The function being non-sovereign in nature, the defense of sovereign immunity was not available. Key takeaway. A municipal authority is liable for negligence in the performance of administrative or public welfare functions, such as maintenance of drains, since these are non-sovereign in nature. Statutory authority does not grant immunity from tort liability where negligence is proved. Would you like me to create? Here is a complete and exam-ready case summary of the classic English tort law case Mayor of Bradford Corporation v. Pickles, 1895, AC 587, which established the principle of damnum sine injuria, damage without legal injury is not actionable. Case name, Mayor of Bradford Corporation v. Pickles. Citation, 1895, AC 587, House of Lords. Court, House of Lords, United Kingdom. Facts. The Corporation of Bradford owned a waterworks company, which supplied water to the town of Bradford. The defendant, Pickles, owned land adjoining the corporation's land. The underground water supply flowed naturally through Pickles' land to the corporation's reservoir. Pickles, in order to compel the corporation to buy his land at a high price, dug a shaft on his land that diverted and diminished the flow of underground water reaching the corporation's reservoir. This caused loss and inconvenience to the corporation's water supply, affecting the public. The corporation sued Pickles, claiming malicious interference and damage to public water supply, seeking an injunction to stop him. Issue: whether a person is liable in tort for maliciously and intentionally causing harm or loss to another by exercising his lawful rights over his own property. Arguments: plaintiff, corporation, claimed that Pickles' act was malicious, done with bad motive, and intentionally harmful, hence he should be held liable. Defendant, Pickles, argued that he was lawfully using his own property, and the motive behind his act was irrelevant if the act itself was legal. Held. The House of Lords dismissed the corporation's claim. It was held that Pickles was not liable, even though his act was malicious and caused loss to the corporation. Judgment, ratio decidendi. Lord Halsbury, LC stated, if the act done is lawful, the motive with which it is done is altogether irrelevant. The court emphasized that the defendant had a legal right to use his own land as he pleased, including interfering with the underground water on it. The motive or intention, even if malicious, does not make a lawful act unlawful. Principle established. 1. Damnum sine injuria, damage without legal injury is not actionable. Or the plaintiff suffered actual loss, damnum, but no violation of a legal right, injuria. Or hence, no tort was committed. 2. Motive is irrelevant when the act itself is lawful. Or even an act done with bad motive does not become actionable if the actor is exercising a legal right. Significance. This case is a leading authority on the maxim damnum sine injuria. It draws a clear line between moral wrongs and legal wrongs. The law protects only legal rights, not economic or emotional interests. The case has been frequently cited in India, for instance in O.P. Sitharamaiah vs. G. Mahalakshmimma, A 1958 AP 103, where lawful competition causing business loss was held non-actionable. Contrast with Ashby v. White, 1703, injuria sine damno, where violation of a legal right, even without damage, is actionable. Together, these two cases form the foundation of tort liability in common law. Conclusion. The House of Lords held that Pickles was not liable, as he was exercising his legal rights over his property. The motive was immaterial, and no legal right of the corporation was violated. Therefore, it was a case of damnum sine injuria, damage without legal injury. Key takeaway. A lawful act, even if done maliciously and causing harm, does not amount to a tort. Legal injury, not mere damage or bad motive, is the basis of liability in tort. Would you like me to create this case summary in your handwritten exam style, blue ink notebook page, format, like the previous ones? Here is a classic and concise case summary of the foundational tort law case Gloucester Grammar School case, 1410, YB11 Hen. IV 47, which illustrates the principle of damnum sine injuria, damage without legal injury is not actionable. Case name, Gloucester Grammar School case, 1410, citation, YB11 Hen. IV 47, Court, King's Bench, England. Facts. A schoolmaster, the plaintiff, ran a grammar school in Gloucester. Another schoolmaster, the defendant, who was formerly his assistant, set up a rival school nearby. Because of this competition, the plaintiff's students left his school and joined the defendants, causing the plaintiff a financial loss, reduced income from fees. The plaintiff sued the defendant, claiming that the defendant's act had caused him monetary loss and was therefore a civil wrong. Issue: whether a person can claim damages in tort for financial loss caused by lawful competition, i.e., without violation of a legal right. Held. The court dismissed the plaintiff's claim. It was held that the defendant's act of opening a rival school was lawful, and hence, even though the plaintiff suffered loss, no legal injuria, was caused. Therefore, no action could lie. The court dismissed the plaintiff's claim. It was held that the defendant's act of opening a rival school was lawful, and hence, even though the plaintiff suffered loss, no legal injuria, was caused. Therefore, no action could lie against the defendant. Judgment, ratio decidendi. The court stated, the defendant could lawfully set up a school, even though it caused loss to the plaintiff, for he has the liberty of doing so. The plaintiff's loss of profit was a natural consequence of fair competition, not an infringement of any legal right. Thus, damage, damnum, was suffered, but no legal right was violated, sine injuria. Principle established. 1. Damnum sine injuria, damage without legal injury is not actionable. Or a person is not entitled to compensation merely because he has suffered loss or inconvenience. Or for an action in tort, there must be a violation of a legal right. 2. Lawful competition is not actionable. Or a lawful act, even if it results in harm to another's business, does not constitute a tort. Significance. This is one of the earliest cases in the history of tort law to establish the principle that loss without violation of a legal right is not a wrong. It is frequently cited along with O. Mayor of Bradford v. Pickles, 1895, AC 587, and O. P. Sitharamaiah vs. G. Mahalakshmimma, AIR 1958 AP 103, which reaffirm the same principle. It serves as a contrast to Ashby v. White, 1703, which established the opposite principle, injuria sine damno, violation of a right without damage is actionable. Conclusion. The defendant was not liable, as his act of opening a rival school was lawful. The plaintiff's loss was damnum sine injuria, damage without violation of a legal right, and hence, not actionable in tort. Key takeaway. Lawful competition, even if it causes economic loss, does not constitute a tort. The law protects legal rights, not business interests or profits. Would you like? Here is a complete and structured case summary of the landmark constitutional tort case Bhim Singh v. State of Jammu and Kashmir, A 1986 South Carolina 494, a milestone in Indian law concerning violation of fundamental rights, forced imprisonment, and compensation for unlawful detention. Case name, Bhim Singh v. State of Jammu and Kashmir and other citation, A 1986 South Carolina 494. Court, Supreme Court of India. Bench, O. Chinnappa Reddy and M. Dutt, J.J. Facts. Bhim Singh, a member of the Legislative Assembly, MLA, in Jammu and Kashmir, was a member of the opposition party. On the 9th of September 1985, he was arrested by the police while he was on his way to attend a session of the Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. He was wrongfully detained and not produced before a magistrate within 24 hours, as required by Article 22(2) of the Constitution and Section 57 of the CRPC. Due to this illegal detention, he missed the assembly session, where an important vote of confidence was to be taken against the ruling government. His wife filed a petition under Article 32 before the Supreme Court seeking his release and appropriate relief. Issues. 1. Whether Bhim Singh's fundamental rights under Articles 21 and 22(2) were violated by his unlawful detention. 2. Whether the state was liable for the misuse of power and malicious actions of its police officers. 3. Whether the Supreme Court could award monetary compensation for such a violation of fundamental rights. Arguments. Petitioner's side, Bhim Singh. His arrest and detention were mollified and politically motivated. or the police deliberately prevented him from attending the assembly to manipulate the vote of confidence, or his right to personal liberty and freedom of movement were violated. Respondent's side, State of J&K, or claimed that Bhim Singh was arrested lawfully, and the delay in respondent or his right to personal liberty and freedom of movement were violated. Respondent's side, State of J&K, or claimed that Bhim Singh was arrested lawfully, and the delay in producing him before a magistrate was unintentional. Held. The Supreme Court held that the arrest and detention were illegal and in gross violation of fundamental rights guaranteed under Articles 21 and 22(2). The court observed that Bhim Singh had been deprived of his liberty unlawfully and that this was a clear case of malice in law and in fact. Judgment, Ratio Decidendi. The court held, when a person comes to us with the complaint that he has been arrested and detained with a mischievous or malicious intent and deprived of his liberty without the authority of law, this court has a duty to protect him. The court further ruled that, or the police officers involved were grossly negligent and acted with mala fide intent, or the state was vicariously liable for their wrongful acts committed in the course of employment, or the violation of Bhim Singh's constitutional rights entitled him to monetary compensation. Compensation awarded. The Supreme Court awarded 50,000 rupees as exemplary damages to Bhim Singh, payable by the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Principles established. 1. Constitutional tort. The state can be held liable in damages for the violation of fundamental rights by its officers. 2. Protection of liberty. The right to life and personal liberty, Article 21, cannot be curtailed except according to procedure established by law. 3. Judicial remedy. The Supreme Court, under Article 32, and High Courts, under Article 226, have the power to award monetary compensation for the violation of fundamental rights. 4. Accountability of police and state. Police officials can be held personally accountable for abuse of power, and the state bears ultimate responsibility. Significance. This case is a landmark in the development of the concept of constitutional torts and public law compensation in India. It established that mere declaration of rights is not sufficient. Courts must also grant effective remedies including monetary compensation. Paved the way for later judgments such as Orudal Shah v. State of Bihar, AIR 1983 SC 1086, O Nilabati Behera v. State of paved the way for later judgments such as Orudal Shah v. State of Bihar, AIR 1983 SC 1086, O Nilabati Behera v. State of Orissa 1993, 2, SC, C, 746, where compensation for custodial death was awarded. Conclusion. The Supreme Court held that Bhim Singh's arrest and detention were illegal and a gross abuse of power. His fundamental rights under Articles 21 and 22(2) were violated, and the state was held liable to pay compensation of 50,000 rupees. Key takeaway. Bhim Singh v. State of J&K, 1986, established that for violation of fundamental rights, particularly illegal detention, the courts can grant monetary compensation against the state, marking a significant evolution of constitutional tort liability in India. Would you like me to create this case in your exam-style handwritten notes format? Here's a complete, exam-ready summary of the landmark case Jacob Mathew v. State of Punjab 2005-6 SC, C1, one of the most important judgments on medical negligence and professional liability in tort law and criminal law in India. Case name, Jacob Mathew v. State of Punjab and ANR. Citation, 2005-6 SC, C1, AIR 2005 South Carolina 3180. Court, Supreme Court of India. Bench, R.C. Lahoti, C.J., G.P. Mathur, and P.K. Balasubramanian, J.J. Facts. The deceased, a patient, was admitted to a private ward of the Christian Medical College and Hospital, Ludhiana, where the appellant, Dr. Jacob Mathew, was a senior doctor. The patient had difficulty in breathing, and the doctor ordered for an oxygen cylinder. When the cylinder was brought, it was found empty. By the time another cylinder was arranged, the patient died. The complainant, the deceased's son, filed a criminal case against the doctor under Section 304A of the Indian Penal Code, IPC, causing death by negligence. The High Court of Punjab and Haryana refused to quash the criminal proceedings. The doctor appealed to the Supreme Court, claiming that mere error or accident does not amount to criminal negligence. Issues. 1. What is the degree of negligence required to hold a doctor criminally liable under Section 304 AIPC? 2. What constitutes medical negligence in civil and criminal law? 3. Should doctors be given any legal protection against frivolous criminal prosecution? Arguments. Appellant, Dr. Jacob Matthew. The incident was an accident, not a result of gross negligence. Medical professionals must be given reasonable protection, as every mishap or death during treatment cannot be treated as a criminal offense. The prosecution must show gross or reckless negligence, not mere error of judgment. Respondent, state. The doctor failed to ensure that oxygen equipment was functional, which shows negligence in duty of care. The act resulted in death, hence criminal liability under Section 304A should apply. Held. The Supreme Court quashed the criminal proceedings against Dr. Jacob Matthew. It was held that no criminal case can be sustained unless the negligence is gross and shows reckless disregard for human life. Judgment, ratio decidendi. The court drew a distinction between civil negligence and criminal negligence. 1. Civil negligence, tort. Black small square arises when a professional fails to exercise reasonable care or skill. Black small square the standard is of a reasonable and competent professional in that field. Black small square liability results in compensation, damages. 2. Criminal negligence. Black small square requires gross negligence or recklessness, conduct so careless that it shows utter disregard for the safety of others. Black small square liability results in punishment, not just compensation. The court approved the Bolam test, from Bolam v. Friern Hospital Management Committee, 1957, 1 WLR 582. A doctor is not guilty of negligence if he has acted in accordance with a practice accepted as proper by a responsible body of medical men skilled in that particular art. Hence, if a doctor acts according to a recognized medical practice, he cannot be held liable even if the outcome is unfortunate. Guidelines laid down by the Supreme Court. 1. Distinction between civil and criminal liability. A simple lack of care or an error of judgment may constitute civil liability but not criminal negligence. 2. Gross negligence required for criminal liability. Or to prosecute a doctor under Section 304 AIPC, there must be gross negligence amounting to recklessness. 3. Precautions for criminal prosecution. Or before proceeding against a doctor, independent medical opinion from a competent doctor or medical board should be obtained. Or police should not arrest or prosecute a doctor without prima facie evidence of gross negligence. 4. Protection for medical professionals. Or medical practitioners should be allowed to perform their duties without fear of harassment, as errors in treatment do not automatically amount to crime. Principle established. 1. Medical negligence in tort, civil liability, failure to exercise reasonable skill and care expected of a competent doctor. 2. Criminal negligence under Section 304 AIPC, gross or reckless negligence showing disregard for patient safety. 3. Bolam test, standard of care measured by the norms accepted by the medical profession itself. 4. Protection from harassment. Doctors cannot be prosecuted unless there is strong prima facie evidence. Significance. Jacob Matthew v. State of Punjab, 2005, is a landmark case on medical negligence in India. It balanced patient rights with protection for medical professionals. The judgment laid down the legal standard for determining both civil and criminal liability of doctors. It remains the guiding precedent for courts in medical negligence cases in India. Conclusion. The Supreme Court held that Dr. Jacob Matthew was not criminally liable, as the negligence alleged did not amount to gross negligence. It was an error or accident, not a criminal act. Thus, criminal proceedings were quashed. Key takeaway. Every mishap is not a crime. A doctor is criminally liable only when the negligence is gross or reckless, showing a complete disregard for life and safety. Ordinary negligence may lead to civil liability, compensation, but not criminal punishment. Would you like me to create this case in your handwritten exam-style format, Blue Ink Notebook look, with underlined headings and structured points.